In America, where we're supposedly leading the way, it feels like California is sprinting ahead, right into oncoming traffic. While the state's infrastructure crumbles faster than Gavin Newsom's hair gel budget, we're banning gas cars, declaring avian flu emergencies, and installing fat czars in San Francisco. Yes, you heard me right. The Golden State has officially traded fixing roads for fixing a relationship with birthday cake. Spoiler alert, no one's buying it, especially because it's gluten-free. See, the theme here is priorities, how the left has mastered the art of solving problems absolutely nobody asked about while ignoring the crises staring us directly in the face. From Gavin Newsom's starring role in The Fast and the Delusional, delivering sermons about gas cars and jobs like he's Silicon Valley's Greta Thunberg, to fat acceptance activists claiming that asking for smaller cake slices is literal sexism, California seems determined to turn itself into Detroit 2.0. But first, we dive into a profound philosophical showdown on the morality of eating chicken. Because when the world's on fire, vegans are here to lecture us about bigger fish to fry, or not fry, as the case may be.
You have other options available. You don't have to take an animal's life, but you choose to.
Well,
and that's what we're talking to you about. I feel upset
because you guys are eating my food's food?
Most of the animals that are consumed by humanity, they don't even eat other animals. They eat nutrition from the ground, and so, or they get fed soy or what have you. And so it's like we're making this distinction that we have to eat them, but we're basically eating the middleman in order to get the nutrients that we need from the ground that the animal is getting anyway.
Nah, I understand what you're saying, I get it, but at the same time, just being on a plant-based diet is not gonna work for me. I can tell you, I don't need to try it. I'm not gonna try it, but I completely respect you guys for doing what you do. That's fine. I always come by the motto, live and let live. I really don't care. You guys do your thing, I'll do my thing, and we're good, you know?
But you're not living.
Live is ironic when you're killing.
I'm not talking about that right now. I'm talking about,
You just said it.
Very
It doesn't
contradictory.
just extend to
No.
humans. That's
I'm
human
talking about you
supremacy.
four individuals right here, right now. I'm not talking about Bambi, I'm not talking
Really?
about Baloo the bear over there at Disneyland. I'm talking about you guys right here.
But what's the difference between letting me live and letting a non-human animal live? Like, I don't think that it would be any more wrong for you to kill me right now than it would be for you to go and kill a chicken right now. I think that would be morally
And
equivalent.
that's your point of view, and that's fine.
Clearly, folks, we've solved all human problems, poverty, hunger, wars, and now we're being told the next great moral frontier is fighting for animal rights. Because apparently animal rights are just as important as human rights. That's the actual premise we're dealing with here, that killing a chicken carries the same moral weight as killing a human being. If we were to take some of these Jubilee brainiacs at face value, we'd believe Bambi and Baloo the bear aren't just woodland creatures, they're one step away from holding a press conference to demand their civil liberties. Now first, let's start with a big, ludicrous claim. There's no difference between killing a human and killing a chicken. Well, congratulations on saying something so ludicrous, it makes flat earthers look rational. If you can't see a moral and practical distinction between a human life and a bird with a brain power of a sock, I can't help you, okay? Humans are capable of complex thought, innovation, and literally building civilizations. Chickens, they can peck the dirt and, if they're lucky, star in a bucket of KFC. Now, this idea that we're eating the middleman by consuming animals, cute, but wrong. Here's the reality. Animals are biological converters. They take rough, inedible plant material, stuff humans can't digest, like grasses and low-grade fodder, and transform it into nutrient-dense protein, fats, and vitamins. That steak on your plate is not just eating your food's food. It's eating something nature has optimized for human health for millennia. Let's talk about the health side of all this. Vegan diets, objectively, they're nutritional disasters. Iron, deficient. The American Journal of Clinical Nutrition shows vegans, especially women and children, are at a higher risk for iron deficiency anemia. Vitamin B12, forget it. Unless you're popping supplements, you're on the fast track to neurological damage. Just ask the National Institutes of Health in 2016. And omega-3s, sure, you can chug flaxseed oil, but without EPA and DHA found in animal products, your brain function takes a hit. The British Medical Journal confirms vegans consistently show lower levels of these critical fats compared to meat eaters. And let's not forget protein quality. High quality animal protein provides all essential amino acids, whereas whereas plant-based proteins lack completeness. Research from the Journal of Nutrition shows that inadequate protein intake in vegans can lead to muscle loss, poor bone density, and increased frailty, particularly in older adults. So much for that healthier lifestyle. Now, what happens when vegans skip these nutrients? Look at this evidence. A 2020 study in Nutrients found that vegan diets correlated with higher risk of anemia and deficiencies in vitamins D, B12, and calcium. A European Journal of Clinical Nutrition study also pointed out vegans are more prone to impaired immune function, hair loss, and fatigue due to these gaps. Want to thrive? You need to eat animal protein. Want to spend your life arguing about the moral feelings of chickens while your energy plummets and your hair falls out? Go vegan. But here's a kicker, folks. If you want to eat tofu and kale until you're translucent, knock yourself out. I believe in your freedom to do that. You do you, boo. But don't lecture the rest of us on your moral superiority while standing on a foundation of malnutrition and impracticality. You're not saving the planet. You're virtue signaling with a side of quinoa. The fact is, humans evolved into omnivores. Meat consumption is not just natural, it's why our brains developed to their current size. Anthropological studies from nature confirm that increased access to meat played a pivotal role in human evolution by providing dense, bioavailable energy to fuel larger brains. Ever wonder why we're at the top of the food chain and not the bottom? Because we eat animals, not the other way around. That's called survival, and there's nothing immoral about it. So while you're out here empathizing with chickens, the rest of us are out here building civilizations and living healthy, efficient lives. If you want to bring Bambi into the United Nations, be my guest, but leave the rest of us to enjoy our steak guilt-free. And speaking about diets, somebody who should go on a diet is San Francisco's new fat czar. In enters Virgie Tovar as San Francisco's weight stigma czar. Yes, that's a real title. Tovar, a self-proclaimed fat activist and author of You Have the Right to Remain Fat, is tasked with combating weight stigma and promoting body acceptance because while crime, homelessness, and crumbling infrastructure are running wild, city leaders apparently decided that what San Francisco really needs right now is a fat czar to make sure no one feels bad about asking for seconds. Priority, folks. Priorities.
Hi, my name is Virgie Tovar, and I'm the author of You Have the Right to Remain Fat, as well as a few other books on fat positivity and body acceptance. When I think about what people might be surprised by or what you wouldn't think of when you think of eating disorders, I immediately think of being a kid. I was a kid in a larger body, a teen in a larger body, and also I'm an adult in a larger body. And the message I always got from my doctor was shrink your body by any means necessary. And it really felt like there was a sense of a don't ask, don't tell. So because I truly believed, right, and this is where I think the surprise comes in. I really believed that this was about my health. I really believed that my doctor was right.
San Francisco, folks, a city drowning in crime, homelessness, and streets that resemble a war zone, has decided its latest solution is appointing a fat czar. Yes, while residents dodge human waste on sidewalks, fentanyl overdoses skyrocket, and businesses flee, city leadership declare the real emergency: making sure no one feels bad about being obese. You can't make this up. Now, what's San Francisco's fat czar Virgie Tovar's big complaint? That doctors told her to lose weight for her health, advice she calls oppressive. Let's be clear, telling someone to lose weight to avoid diabetes, heart disease, and premature death isn't stigma, it's medicine. Meanwhile, San Francisco collapses, and we're here supposed to applaud a movement that normalizes a preventable health crisis. And make no mistake, obesity is a crisis. Over 42% of Americans are obese, and type 2 diabetes now afflicts over 37 million people, disproportionately harming low-income communities. Diabetes alone costs this country $327 billion annually in healthcare and loss of productivity. But instead of encouraging healthy habits, we're told obesity is just fine and doctors are the villains. Promoting fat acceptance doesn't solve anything. It hides the problem while people suffer. This is a textbook example of leftist governance. Destroy public resources, raise taxes to fund their incompetence, and distract citizens with meaningless social crusades. Crime ignored, homelessness exploding, streets unusable. Instead, they focused on weight stigma, as if that's what's holding society back. It's like watching a house burn down while debating its curtain patterns. And here's what's truly dangerous. This movement enables people to ignore their health under the guise of body positivity. Obesity increases the risk of diabetes, heart disease, stroke, liver failure, and cancer. That's reality, not oppression. Empowerment comes from promoting healthy eating, physical activity, and personal responsibility, not pretending obesity is normal and silencing doctors who dare to say otherwise. San Francisco's leadership has clearly abandoned its duty to fix real problems, replacing it with feel-good nonsense that costs lives. While the city crumbles, they focus on protecting feelings instead of the future. It's a failure, plain and simple. And as businesses close, crime spreads, and the streets decay, we're left asking, how much longer do we let cities like San Francisco destroy themselves before we demand actual solutions from their leaders?
CRFI. If you're like many women, you've been to a birthday party or a small office gathering, an event that's meant to bring people together. There's swinging tunes, some adult beverages, and good convo. And then it comes time to cut the cake, and someone decides to ruin everything.
Oh my God, that slice is huge. That slice is bigger than Beyonce's paycheck. Can you cut me half of that?
A cake-related fat-phobic incident, or CRFI, is that moment when it's time to eat delicious cake and it's interrupted by a moralizing impulse. Inevitably, there's always someone at the party who has to declare publicly that their slice is too large, and that the person who's cutting the cake, almost invariably a woman, must do some disproportionate amount of labor in order to accommodate their need to feel superior.
Hello. That is just straight up retarded. But anyway, let's grab a fork and a napkin because we're diving into what might be the most absurd concept to come out of the fat acceptance movement yet. Cake-related fat-phobic incidents, or CRFIs, for those fluent in pseudo-academic nonsense. Yes, apparently, asking for a smaller slice of cake at a party is no longer a personal preference. It's a full-blown act of oppression. Someone call the UN. We've got a human rights violation over frosting proportions. Actually, don't call them. They don't do anything at all. It's not like they would resolve that. This so-called phenomenon claims that when someone, typically a woman, asks for a smaller slice of cake, they're not just making a personal choice about their own health or, I don't know, trying to avoid a sugar coma. No. According to this genius fat czar, it's a moralizing impulse designed to shame others. This is rhetorical trickery at its finest. Take something completely benign, inject it with victimhood, slap a fancy acronym on it, and voila, pseudoscience is born. And man, she looked pregnant. So, makes sense. Now, let's be clear. Someone saying, that's too big for me, can you cut a smaller slice, isn't an attack on your existence. It's an adult exercising self-restraint. CRFI proponents assume intent where none exists. Not everything is about you. If someone skips half the cake, maybe it's because they care about their health, an idea that shockingly used to be considered a virtue. And let's not kid around. If the same person grabbed seconds on nachos or soda, it'd suddenly be applauded as body positivity. That's the game here, folks. But let's get to the root of this nonsense. Obesity is not something we should be normalizing. It's one of the most dangerous public health crises of our time. The World Obesity Federation projects that by 2035, over 51% of the global population will be overweight or obese. That's half the planet. In the United States alone, obesity rates have tripled since the 1970s, rising from 13% to over 42% today. Even worse, childhood obesity has skyrocketed. 1 in 5 kids now struggles with it. These children aren't just big boned. They're being set up for a lifetime of chronic illness. Now, the consequences are staggering. Obesity is a major risk factor for 13 types of cancer, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, stroke, and liver failure. The CDC reports that obesity-related conditions cost the U.S. over $173 billion annually, and obese individuals pay an average of $1,861 more per year in medical expenses than those at a healthy weight. Globally, obesity now contributes to more than 5 million deaths every year, making it a bigger health threat than malnutrition in many parts of the world. Sugar in particular is a massive contributor to this crisis. Excessive sugar consumption has been linked to obesity, insulin resistance, and skyrocketing rates of type 2 diabetes, a condition now affecting over 37 million Americans. That's not stigma, that's reality. When someone chooses moderation, they're not attacking you. They're making a decision to avoid joining those grim statistics. And here's where the fat acceptance movement's rhetoric becomes downright dangerous. Instead of encouraging healthy habits like moderation, exercise, and mindful eating, they demonize restraint as oppressive and promote behaviors that lead to preventable illnesses. This is not empowering, it's enabling. By pretending obesity is just another body type, they ignore the undeniable health risks that come along with it, while saddling our healthcare systems and taxpayers with billions in preventable costs. And let's not miss the irony of the gender argument either. CFR advocates claim that asking for smaller slices of cake burdens women, since they're often the ones serving it. Really? That's your feminist fight? Forget wage gaps, maternal mortality, or domestic violence. No, the real battle is the emotional labor of cutting cake. It's an argument so trivial, it undermines the very credibility of feminism itself. Now here's the truth. Promoting moderation and healthier habits isn't an attack, it's compassion. It's about encouraging people to thrive, not enabling a downward spiral under the guise of acceptance. When someone exercises control, they're not shaming you. They're simply making a choice to avoid becoming part of an epidemic that is shortening lifespans, increasing healthcare costs, and overwhelming health systems around the world.
Let's take a step back and view what's happening through a critical feminist lens. CRFIs typically happen in environments where there are primarily or exclusively women. Women are disproportionately negatively affected by diet culture because diet culture maps onto sexism. Like many parts of diet culture, there is a significant performance component. You have to show others that you are being good. Controlling how much you eat is part of what it means to be a, quote, good woman. This kind of behavior is a way for people to keep other people in check through food moralizing, surveillance, and policing. These are the mechanisms that are at the core of diet culture and weight control. The idea that you can position yourself as superior to others through self-control and self-denial is super sexist. CRFIs have a history of creating a hierarchy among women and ultimately in maintaining misogynist expectations.
Well, according to our fat czar, asking for a smaller slice of cake is no longer about personal preference or health. It's a moralized act of sexism designed to shame others. Translation, a bunch of word salad to justify staying fat because taking care of yourself requires effort, and effort is apparently too oppressive. Now, let's deal in reality for a moment, please. This argument that self-control is performative and part of some oppressive hierarchy doesn't empower anyone. It's a smokescreen. What's really happening here is simple. Personal responsibility is being replaced with excuses. You don't want to watch what you eat? Fine. You don't want to hit the gym? That's your call. But turning someone else's moderation into a feminist crisis is just projecting your laziness onto others. Now let's talk about the science again, because I love doing that when we can use that to rebut all this crazy fat czar stuff. According to the Global Burden of Disease study, 4 million deaths worldwide every year are directly attributed to obesity. Obesity-related conditions have become so severe that the National Institutes of Health reports 20 years of life expectancy can be lost in extreme cases. And for those thinking this is just about aesthetics, let's look at the numbers. Obese individuals have a 55% higher risk of depression and a 33% higher chance of developing dementia later in life. Meanwhile, studies from Harvard University confirm that obesity increases the risk of severe chronic pain, crippling quality of life for millions. But it gets worse. A report from the American Diabetes Association shows that obesity is directly tied to the explosion of type 2 diabetes, which now impacts 1 in 10 Americans, over 37 million people, and costs the economy $327 billion annually. I know I keep repeating this, but this has to get through people's heads. These aren't abstract numbers. They're devastating realities. And no, this isn't diet culture or food moralizing. This is public health. Pretending that obesity is fine and attacking anyone who tries to live healthier doesn't change these facts It ensures more people get sick. And let's pause to appreciate the absurdity of San Francisco's priorities here. The city falling apart. Violent crime is up 7.5% over the year, according to the SFPD. And homelessness costs taxpayers over $1 billion a year with zero improvement. But rather than clean up the streets or stop the mass exodus of residents, they're appointing this fat czar to defend people's right to eat oversized portions of cake. It's like the Titanic sinking while someone argues about whether the band should play jazz or classical. And here's a real kicker. These activists claim that self-control, something most adults strive for in all areas of life, is sexist because it reflects societal expectations. Newsflash, self-control isn't gender. It's a hallmark of maturity. Telling women that watching what they eat makes them victims doesn't empower them. It infantilizes them. Women are fully capable of choosing moderation for their own health without collapsing into a puddle of patriarchal shame. At the end of the day, no amount of wordplay or academic jargon will erase the reality of obesity. This isn't about diet culture. It's about science. It's about the fact that obesity increases the risk of heart disease, stroke, cancer, and mental health decline. Encouraging people to ignore that reality under the guise of acceptance is not compassion. It's harm disguised as empowerment.
Where do you see the intersection, really? What is your definition of health?
Yeah, that's really complicated, right? I think I want to talk about that question, but I want to start by saying that, no one has to be healthy. No, right? Like, I mean, it's like, no, like there is no governing body that's like out there putting, you know what I mean? It's like no one owes anybody that in either the traditional sense of the word or any other more innovative or, more politicized, maybe even version of that word. So I think it's important to say like, and I want to back up and bring in intersectionality and say like, right, like look at the disabled community, right? Like I think people with disabilities have and activists within that space have consistently been saying like, I'm never going to be your notion of healthy. That doesn't mean I don't get to be a full human. You get to treat me some kind of way, right? And so I think that I love taking that principle within disability rights to fat activism and to understandings of fatness. So I want to start there, right? Like no matter what size you are, you don't owe anybody else your health. But I mean, for me, right, like in an ideal world where in an ideal world, there wouldn't be health-based gatekeeping at all.
Whoa, Miss Fat Czar, leave some chins for the rest of us. Anyway, let's wade into the intellectual swamp of modern fat activism, where up is down, health is optional, and personal responsibility is somehow oppressive. According to this particular brand of delusion, no one owes anyone health, and any effort to encourage healthier habits is now gatekeeping. That's right, encouraging people to avoid preventable illness, chronic pain, and early death is apparently some kind of moral crime. Spoiler alert, it's not. It's called caring about reality. Now let's start with the obvious. This claim that no one has to be healthy isn't just lazy, it's dangerous. Sure, no one's holding you at gunpoint and forcing you to go for a jog, but let's not pretend health is a neutral choice that impacts no one but yourself. We live in a society where your decisions, like neglecting your health, affect everyone. Healthcare costs? Shared. Resources for treating preventable illnesses like obesity and type 2 diabetes? Shared. But wait, it gets even better. While these activists claim no one owes anyone health, they conveniently ignore the real-world consequences of a nation in a health crisis. Let's talk about America's military readiness, which is currently under attack, not from foreign adversaries, but from the growing waistline of our population. According to a report by Mission Readiness, 77% of young Americans are unfit for military service, with obesity being the leading disqualifier. You heard that right, folks. The country's rising obesity rate is a direct threat to national security. Forget the battlefield. These recruits can't even pass basic fitness requirements. So tell me again how health doesn't matter. Now let's address the absurd attempt to link fat activism to disability rights. It's offensive and absurd. People with disabilities face real, unchangeable challenges that often impact their health through no fault of their own. Equating this to someone making a choice to remain obese is a slap in the face of the disabled community. Disability activists fight to overcome barriers that society imposes on them. Fat activists fight to remove accountability from their own lifestyle choices. These are not the same thing, and claiming otherwise is a rhetorical bait and switch. And let's talk about the logic here, if you can call it that. Fat activists say they don't owe anyone health, but They still expect society to accommodate the consequences of unhealthy habits. Higher healthcare costs, decreased productivity, and increased strain on public resources don't just disappear because you wrapped your argument in buzzwords like gatekeeping and intersectionality. This isn't about personal freedom. It's about shifting responsibility onto everyone else while pretending health is some abstract social construct. It's not. Health is measurable. It's real. And pretending otherwise doesn't make it less true. At the root of this is the same old excuse factory, a refusal to accept personal responsibility. Taking care of your health is hard. It requires effort, discipline, yes, self-control. But rather than acknowledging that, these activists would rather rewrite reality to justify their choices. Health becomes optional, obesity becomes empowerment, and anyone who disagrees is a gatekeeping oppressor. It's delusion wrapped in victimhood, served with a side of laziness. Here's the truth. No one is forcing you to run marathons or eat kale for every meal, but don't expect society to clap for your excuses or pretend obesity is a neutral state. It's not. Obesity is a public health crisis with devastating consequences, economic, social, and personal. And if the very real risk of heart disease, diabetes, and premature death isn't enough to get you off the couch, maybe the fact that 77% of young Americans can't qualify for military service because of this issue will snap you out of it. At the end of the day, health isn't punishment. It's an opportunity. It's the chance to live longer, feel better, and contribute more to your life and the lives of those around you. The real empowerment comes from making positive changes, not inventing word salads to justify the status quo. So let's drop the excuses, cut the buzzwords, and face the facts. You don't owe anyone health, but you sure as hell owe it to yourself to stop lying about its importance. And speaking of California having all of its priorities wrong, you couldn't talk about that without mentioning our beloved governor, and I say that sarcastically, Gavin Hair Gel Newsom is back at it again, folks. And this time he's declared a state of emergency over bird flu. Yes, right there is his declaration. And you heard that correctly. Well, California descends into a dystopian nightmare of homelessness, skyrocketing crime, crumbling infrastructure, fat czars, and businesses fleeing faster than his approval ratings. Newsom's big solution is to panic about dairy cows sneezing and the hypothetical possibility of a pandemic that doesn't exist. It's like watching a firefighter ignore a 5-alarm blaze because he's too busy lecturing us about damp firewood. Now let's set the record straight here. While avian flu is a serious issue for livestock and poultry, the so-called emergency for humans is laughable. To date, there have been exactly 0 cases of human-to-human transmission of H5N1 in California or anywhere else in the US. That's right, 0, nada, nothing. According to the CDC, 61 human cases of bird flu have been recorded in the US since the outbreak began, most mild, and all of them stemming from direct contact with infected animals, not from other humans. The World Health Organization backs this up. Globally, there have been 939 recorded cases since 2003 with no deaths in the US from this outbreak. So what's Newsom doing? Declaring a state of emergency to look like he's ahead of the curve when in reality, he's fighting a problem that doesn't exist for the general public. And let's talk about this Louisiana case that Newsom is dangling as his justification. Yes, a single severe case occurred in a 65-year-old patient with underlying health conditions who contracted the virus from direct exposure to a backyard flock and wild birds. A tragic case? Sure, of course. A reason to send California into DEFCON 1? Absolutely not. There's no evidence this virus has mutated to spread human to human. And the CDC confirms the risk to the public remains low. But hey, Gavin never lets data get in the way of a good press release. We all know that. Meanwhile, let's talk about California's real emergencies because they're piling up faster than Gavin can comb his beautiful, luscious hair. Our state's homelessness crisis has cost taxpayers over $20 billion with no progress in sight. Violent crime has surged with crime in major cities like Los Angeles, where I live, and San Francisco, up 13% in recent years. The education system is a disaster, ranked 35th in the nation despite record spending. Businesses are fleeing the state in droves thanks to excessive regulation and sky-high taxes. And don't get me started on California's broken energy grid, where rolling blackouts have become a summer tradition here. But nope, Newsom isn't focused on any of that. Instead, he's spending millions on PPE for farm workers and creating a panic over cows with sniffles. Why? Because emergency declarations are easy. They make headlines, allow politicians to funnel money into bloated bureaucracies, and give the illusion of action while real-world problems get ignored. And here's another dose of reality. Avian flu has been around for decades, and while it's devastating for poultry and livestock industries, it does not currently pose a significant threat to humans. The 645 quarantined dairy herds birds in California represent a crisis for the agriculture sector, not the public at large. Pasteurization eliminates the virus from milk, and to date, no human infections in California have been linked to drinking pasteurized milk. So while Newsom flings around words like emergency, the truth is H5N1 hasn't figured out the key to spread between humans, and there's no evidence that it's on the brink of doing so. So here's the bottom line. Newsom's state of emergency is a classic political distraction. California is falling apart, rising crime, homelessness, broken schools, a fleeing tax base, but Gavin's over here cosplaying as a pandemic savior for a virus that isn't threatening human-to-human transmission. The risk remains low, the CDC confirms it, and no amount of PPE handouts is going to change that. All that being said, Gavin's gonna Gavin, because that's what Gavin does.
These companies are already going in this direction. They're just trying to fight. I mean, they're gonna have to put a cap on clean, not just dirty, in order to roll back these things. It's all changing, and they either should get on board or step aside. And I'm so done with these folks that are just, again, wholly owned subsidiaries of big oil that have polluted this planet and have created the conditions of extremes. I'm done with it. I'm sick and tired of being dependent on decisions made at OPEC and I'm sick of it. We're all sick of paying these high prices. We're sick and tired of this, the politics of this, and we should be drill baby. I'm sick of it. I mean, we can get rid of all that. We're done. Lower costs, more innovation, more economic growth, and cleaning our air, cleaning up the environment, saving people's lives. I mean, you can debate that all you want. I hope he does do that in a few years. They'll be laughed at.
You gotta hand it to Gavin. He rattles off lines like he's reading straight from the virtue signaler's handbook. Polluting the planet, creating extremes, sick of OPEC. Notice something? There's no data, no plan, just buzzwords strung together like he's practicing for a TikTok motivational reel. It's classic Newsom. Lots of noise, no logic, and absolutely nothing to back it up. He's like Justin Trudeau's long-lost cousin. Perfect hair, empty head, and a knack for pushing policies that sound good but destroy everything they touch. Now let's talk about what Gavin's vision actually means. Killing California's oil and gas industry. Oil production in California employs over 50,000 workers and pumps billions of dollars into the state economy. But apparently those jobs and tax revenues are just collateral damage in Gavin's quest to look like the hero of the climate cult. Meanwhile, California still imports 70% of its oil, much of it from foreign countries like Saudi Arabia, where environmental regulations are practically non-existent. That's right, folks. Newsom's plan to clean the air means outsourcing energy production to regimes that don't care about pollution while kneecapping local workers. The brilliance of leftism. And the hypocrisy doesn't stop there. Newsom loves to grandstand about moving toward renewable energy, but here's a little detail he skips over. California's energy grid can't handle it. You remember the rolling blackouts that we have here, like all the time, right? Newsom's push for renewables has already crippled the grid because the technology isn't reliable enough to replace oil, gas, and nuclear. Cutting the state's energy lifeline while demanding innovation is like jumping out of a plane without a parachute and hoping for a soft landing. It's reckless, it's unrealistic, and you're gonna get flattened. But of course, this isn't about solutions. It's about political theater. Gavin talks a big game about lower costs, economic growth, and saving lives, but let's check the scoreboard. Since Gavin Newsom took office, California's gas prices have hit the highest in the nation, sometimes exceeding $6 a gallon. Why? Because of restrictive regulations and policies that force refineries out of business. You can't claim to be lowering costs while actively sabotaging the very industry that keeps energy affordable and accessible, Gavin. And let's not pretend these policies are saving the environment either. Gavin Newsom's crusade to shut down California's energy production doesn't eliminate demand, it just shifts it somewhere else. Oil doesn't magically disappear because Gavin stomps his foot and yells at big oil. It just comes from countries with worse practices, higher emissions, and zero oversight. Meanwhile, California's middle class foots the bill through job losses, skyrocketing energy costs, and businesses fleeing to states like Texas where sanity still reigns.
We will be the first jurisdiction in the world to require all new cars to be sold to be alternative fuel cars. And here's why it's significant. Besides being a game changer in terms of our climate and our energy leadership, it's a game changer in another respect, that the car manufacturers themselves are celebrating and embracing it, including Toyota today, not just Ford and GM.
First, the claim that car manufacturers like Toyota, Ford, and GM are celebrating this policy. Oh, really? Celebrating? Sure. They'll smile politely in front of the cameras because they're playing the PR game and adapting to government pressure. But behind closed doors, the auto industry is looking at Newsom like the mad king of a sinking kingdom. Toyota has repeatedly stated that an all-electric future is not realistic, especially in the short term. Akio Toyoda, the CEO of Toyota, flat out said that that EVs are not the only way to achieve carbon neutrality, and that mandating one solution ignores advancement in other clean technologies like hybrids and hydrogen. And Ford and GM, they're dancing to the tune of massive government subsidies. California's mandates aren't a market-driven revolution. They're propped up by billions in taxpayer incentives and penalties for non-compliance. It's not innovation, it's coercion. Remove the subsidies and tax credits and EV sales plummet. That's not a game changer, that's an artificial bubble. And let's not forget, the average electric vehicle costs $12,000 more than a comparable gas-powered car. For Newsom to pretend this is progress for the working class is downright insulting. Now let's tackle the climate leadership nonsense. Newsom loves to throw out the buzzwords energy leadership, a game changer, carbon neutrality, but does any of that add up? Spoiler alert. No. Here's the reality. California doesn't have the infrastructure to support this pipe dream. Right now, the state can barely keep the lights on. The energy grid is already failing during summer heat waves because it can't handle existing demand, let alone millions of EVs charging simultaneously. Where's the leadership in forcing Californians to buy electric cars when there's no reliable way to power them? And ask yourself, where does all this magical clean energy come from? Nearly 60% of California's electricity still comes from natural gas and other fossil fuels. Add to that the environmental toll of mining for the lithium, cobalt, and rare earth materials needed for EV batteries, most of which are extracted in countries with horrific environmental and labor practices, and you start to see why this climate solution isn't as green as Gavin pretends. In fact, a Wall Street Journal analysis found that producing an EV battery can generate up to twice the carbon emissions of manufacturing a gas-powered car. So tell me again, how is this policy saving the planet, Gavin? And let's not forget the logistics of replacing every car on California's roads. Newsom is essentially forcing millions of Californians to abandon affordable, reliable gas-powered vehicles for expensive, impractical electrical ones. And I own one. I know this. What happens to the people who can't afford the EV price tag, let alone the cost of installing a home charger? They'll be priced out of mobility altogether. It's a war on the middle and working classes masquerading as environmental leadership. It's the classic Gavin Newsom move. Punish the average person for not being rich enough to go green. Now let's address the elephant in the room. This policy does nothing to address the real sources of global emissions. Even if California eliminated every car overnight, it would barely make a dent in global CO2 levels because the United States as a whole contributes about 13% of the world's emissions. China, on the other hand, is responsible for nearly 30%, and they're building new coal plants every week. So while Gavin struts around claiming California is leading the world, China and India are laughing their heads off burning coal and outpacing us economically. Now here's the bottom line. Newsom's EV mandate isn't about leadership or innovation. It's about political posturing. He's forcing an unproven, expensive solution onto Californians while ignoring the catastrophic flaws in his plan. The grid can't support it, the costs are unaffordable, the environmental benefits are questionable at best, and the auto industry isn't celebrating, they're complying under duress. Meanwhile, the rest of the world moves on, watching California spiral further into dysfunction under Newsom's leadership. So let's ask the real questions. How does Gavin Newsom expect Californians to embrace electric cars when the energy grid can't even handle current demand? How does pricing working families out of reliable transportation count as progress? Gavin loves to tout California as the envy of the world with these policies and claims he's creating jobs. But where are those jobs when businesses are fleeing the state, energy prices are skyrocketing, and families are left behind? And let's not forget, shifting pollution to overseas mines and coal plants isn't clean energy. It's just outsourcing guilt. This isn't leadership. It's a performative stunt that leaves Californians poor, the grid weaker, and the planet no better off. If this is Gavin's game changer, maybe it's time we change the game and demand real solutions instead of empty slogans. Anyway, you tell me what you think in the comments down below. Have a terrific day. Peace.